Good evening, White Sox fans. It is Wednesday, March 12th. He is Jacob Thome. I am Danny Miller, and this is Future Sox MLB centric podcast, Hot Takes and Heaters. Like I said at the top of the show, it is Wednesday, March 12th. So the weather's getting warmer, and that just means that we are getting closer and closer to meaningful baseball. Take that however you will with this White Sox team. But it's good to be getting closer to opening day and getting back out to the ballpark and enjoying some baseball. How you doing tonight, Jacob?
I'm doing well. I've been sick a little bit, but we're doing all right tonight. So, yeah, I think only a week away from first games happening out in Tokyo, and then what about a couple weeks away from opening day? Actually, I think 2 weeks
Absolutely,
from tomorrow. So
right
excited!
on. Yeah, I'm ready to get back out there. And before we even go on, I probably did it to you again. This is your three shows in a row now, but
Again, not an
I,
issue. Good
I
guy
am
gets it.
going to. Well, I'm going to issue an apology to you and to our listeners because I continually just see that name. And we had a very big slugger with the same last name,
Right.
and you guys pronounce it differently. So you are actually Thome, and I promise to work on that and get it right. But we also have another apology to issue. Apparently, I may have ruffled some feathers last week when I was laughing about not being able to pronounce a particular name. We did have somebody who shared the same last name of the player that we were talking about, AHT, make a comment, and I just want to throw it out there and say I'm sorry. I will promise to do better with that and make sure that I get Anthony Hoopy Tuio Natoa's name right from here on out, or at least try. Thank you. Whoever it was that I don't know if it was a family member, mom, sister, brother. They shared the same last name, so I hope I didn't offend anybody. The one thing I do want to say is we're definitely still hopeful that he is a guy who can be a guy for this White Sox team in the future. We meant no harm by that. So, anywho, moving on. We are going to tackle the starting rotation this week, huh?
Yeah,
Or
that's
at
what we're
least
going to attempt to do.
the potential starting rotation. So, why don't we go ahead and get right into that? Without further ado, I guess we can start with the three guys that we know the team pretty much named as locks. And, let's just start with the guy that has got the most experience on the rotation. He's got like close to 13 years of pro ball, if you want to count all of it together. We've got Martin Perez. What do you think about Martin Perez joining the White Sox rotation this season?
Yeah, he was former All Star not that long ago. Just seemed kind of like an inning eater guy. Gonna get gonna be there every 5 days. Probably not gonna put up anything great. If he does, he'll be traded. So we'll see. There's not a ton of excitement. There's not a ton of anything else. It's just kind of blah, which is perfectly fine for this White Sox rotation. So we'll see. I think he's a pure, just inning eater type of pitcher, which is completely what they needed. Um, Be interested to see who the opening day starter is, if it's him or Davis Martin. But yeah, I think it's boring. He's boring. But it's a needed piece. As somebody can go out there every 5 days and eat some innings.
Absolutely. And you bring up Davis Martin. Our Chuck did an interview with Davis Martin recently on his podcast. And Davis Martin kind of spoke a little bit about, guys that were up. And I don't necessarily want to call them veterans, but guys that had some MLB experience before he had a chance to step out there. And he talked about how those guys have winning mentalities, and they basically believing that they're going to be the best player on the field that day. And Garrett Crochet, the Dylan Ceases, those guys that have been around that are really good pitchers. And he basically said, all those guys that have that mentality are the ones that are the good pitchers, and they're buying into that now. So I think having a guy like Martin Perez come in and say the things that he said, especially when he was interviewed, he said that he feels like these guys need to believe that they cannot just be better than they were last year, but be contenders. Believe in yourself. And I think that's the veteran leadership that this young, very young rotation and even the guys that aren't going to make the rotation maybe, right off the bat at the start of the season this year, we're going to see a lot of pitchers rotate
Yeah.
throughout the season. I mean, most players don't, or I'm sorry, most teams, most organizations don't see. What is he talking about? I'm sorry, I'm looking at the chat here, and I have no idea what Ian's talking about. But did I say what did I say?
I think it was
Oh
in
yeah.
response to the AHT stuff, but
Oh, Roger. Okay. Anyways, see, trying to throw me off my game here. Uh, so yeah, I just feel like having him come in and tell these guys that's what they need and being that veteran presence and getting them to believe in themselves because there is going to be so much turnover. Most teams are going to have no less than 10 or 12 pitchers throughout the entire course of the season. So we're going to see some of these younger pitchers come up even if they're not on the opening day roster. And I believe that's something that we're going to it's just something they need. They're going to need that veteran presence to be able to keep them motivated on a bad, what's expected to be a bad team anyways. So I think it's a really good match, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what he can bring to the table and what he can help get out of these kids.
yeah, it's always nice to have somebody to go to. He made some encouraging comments just about how successful he thinks the team's going to be. Which, hey, I've been there before. I've believed in them before. Um, you'll quickly lose hope, but hey, it's all right. Um, but yeah, so I think just
Well, on that
looking
note,
forward at it. Yeah, we'll move on from that.
no, I was just gonna say you're making me bust out the old heater right off the bat, but that's all right. We're 8.5 minutes in, and I'm really trying. I'm trying to cut back and quit, but man, talking about the Sox sometimes, and
74
yeah.
wins.
Oh, the new guy bringing out my old predictions. Look at this. He's gonna
Yeah.
fit right into FutureSox very well. By the way, I do see your questions in the chat, guys. We're gonna get through this rotation, but I am going to address a couple of those questions real quick. Oh, come on. If I can scroll back up and find that one. Where did it go? I put it up. So referee 583 wants to know, do we think if there's any truth to the Lewis Robert Jr. trade to the Yankees rumors? How do you feel about that?
I'm not sure if they need. I know their outfield's kind of weird now. Um, I mean, they have. I think they're playing Belly in center, and they've moved Judge over. So, and they have Dominguez in left. So I don't know if there's a need for a left or a center fielder there. Obviously, you can move Belly to first though, and that would open up center. But yeah, I don't hate that trade opportunity. I'm not really familiar with the Yankees farm as much as I probably should be. Um, but
Well, the one thing you
we'll
can say
kind of
about the Yankees farm over the years, at least, from our point of view, and what you get back in a trade from them is usually a lot of theirs guys seem overly hyped and overly projected.
them and the
And,
Dodgers are two teams where like every
you know,
prospect seems to be way overhyped.
right. And then you get them, they come into your organization and they're like, well, why? We're just not developing these guys. No, I think a lot of these guys we're getting bamboozled on. I think they just don't have it in what they don't have it in them, what is being reported, and what is being projected upon them. And don't get me wrong, White Sox development system, player development, has not been completely up to par. We've talked about that ad nauseum on all of our shows, and I know the White Sox are working on turning that kind of thing around, but goodness gracious, it's tough dealing when you're making trades with the Yankees and hoping for the best, and it doesn't always or rarely works out the way you want it to. So I personally don't know if there's any truth to the rumors or not. I find it difficult to believe that anybody's going to want to meet the White Sox ask at this point, even with a hot spring, because my thought, and I believe most GMs and most coaching staffs believe the same thing, is spring training numbers are next to meaningless. Everybody's working on something in spring training. The bats are usually ahead of the pitching. Pitchers are working on specific pitches or specific zones, parts of their command. I don't really read into a hot spring as much. Now, don't get me wrong; it's very nice to see, especially when he's looking like he's mostly healthy at this point. And I hope that that continues to be the case. And I hope we do get a chance to see Luis, put it all together, and maybe he becomes the trade piece we're all hoping for at some point in the season. I honestly don't believe he goes anywhere before the season starts. Just my opinion.
I don't either. I will say this about Luis. It's been encouraging to see the walk rate where it is right now. I think he walked again today, so the walk rate's up right around 14%, which would be a like way um, serious career high for him in terms of walk rate. I think his previous career walk rate's like 8%. So seeing the patience pay off a little more. My still wish list for a Luis Robert trade would be that he just stays hot, returns to 2023, trade to the Astros for Cam Smith, but that's a fever dream. That's never going to happen. But yeah, that's my
Yeah,
take.
I don't like to project that far, because things change in a hurry, especially once the season's underway. And baseball is extremely difficult to predict. But
Yeah,
I would not be mad at that return by any means.
right.
I
That'd be
hope
fun.
I honestly, here's something that you're not hearing a lot of lately, because I think everybody's just in the White Sox are in this rebuild mode, and how do you continue to build that system and have guys oh, like Rick and Kenny wanted to do. They wanted to have that continual revolving door of guys just coming up and then replenishing the system with more guys that could do that, which would be awesome. But I wouldn't be mad at being able to play Luis the next couple of years in Chicago if he turns out to be the guy that we always thought he could be. And if he's able to stay healthy enough to do that with this young pitching staff kind of starting to come together here over the next two seasons, and maybe really, working its way into their own, you got to have somebody to build around. No,
Yeah,
I,
and the
I don't
thought
know.
too is if Ishbia buys the team and you're this offseason, which I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's definitely a potential for Ishbia to buy the team this year. And then if you're going to go out and spend in the offseason, um, I think you take Luis, you add hypothetically to the max Kyle Tucker and Vladdy, you know instead of trading Luis, now you hold on to it. But like
But
it's a
that's
tough position
assuming
for
that the
Chris Sale.
Cubs don't extend Tucker. I find it hard to believe they traded one of their best prospects to only have one season of Kyle Tucker, but
Yankees
that's
just
just
did it
me.
with Soto. Same thing.
This is true. You're right. You're right. It's not outside the realm of possibility, but it's just it feels weird because I feel like the Cubs are not in like that finishing piece mode.
Right.
They're not going for it,
I think it would be insane for them not to resign. I mean, well, we're not going to get out of here, but um, especially because they've needed a superstar bat forever, and this seems
Right.
like their first opportunity to have a true superstar bat. But hey, if he gets there, we'll see.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. One other question I wanted to get to before we get back into the rotation. Will Anderson asks, "Is Kyle Teal going to play outfield because of Caro?" And I'll let you start. I'm just going to say I don't think so, but I'll let you go ahead and give an explanation on that if you want to get into it a little bit.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. He's a good defensive catcher. I mean, like that's kind of he's a really high ceiling type of guy just because of the contact skills, the hitting skills, plus the defense at catcher. and you can always use two catchers. I think Cuero and Teal can both play at the same time. One catching, one DHing. That's fine, unless Miguel Vargas, who's on a heater after I called him out for being trash, um, has has really started to heat up in the spring, and he's the permanent DH because my God, do I not want to see him at third? So I don't know. I mean, I know Teal has experience playing in the outfield. I think he played some at Virginia, but we'll see. I would assume that they keep him at catcher though. That's something Getz talked about. I believe in an interview with 670, just kind of having an elite combo of catchers.
I mean, it's a hot
And it's a
commodity
position
in
where you
baseball.
need two. You know,
It
it's not a
is.
position where you only need one. I think the question then becomes what happens with Corey Lee, but I'm not a big Corey Lee guy. Um, so
I think
yeah,
Corey Lee
there's
has done enough with his time in Chicago to where he can get you some value back in a trade. I'm not expecting, we're not talking about top 100 prospects or anything, but valuable nonetheless. Maybe somebody with a specific skill set that you're looking for somewhere down the line, a decent bullpen arm, who
yeah
knows.
a
Uh,
flyer.
well, you're right, but you're looking at somebody who at least shows some sort of value back from him. Obviously not world beater, but I agree with you. I think, and we talked a little bit about this in one of our previous shows. Was it last week or the week before? I can't remember, but it was last week when we were talking about catchers. I think one of the biggest reasons that the White Sox went out and just loaded up the entire system with catchers from top to bottom is because it is such a hot commodity across the league. Teams are always looking for some sort of catching depth, and I think this is a move for the White Sox to kind of showcase some of what they got and make those trades later on and bring whatever they can get back to kind of bolster this rebuild a little bit for themselves. So Brett Beatty would be in the Uncle Ted. I don't disagree with you. The Mets do need a catcher. A lot of teams need catchers. So I don't know if you're going to get Brett Beatty back, but you know, it depends on who we're trading as well too, and kind of how the numbers play out throughout the season.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know. I think Corey Lee has value. I just don't think he has Brett Beatty value. I
and to
mean, he's
answer that
good
question
from.
earlier, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the question was brought up if Kyle Teal could play third, and according to future Sox very own Ian Eskridge, who's in the comments with us at Daily White Sox, if you guys are paying attention, uh, Kyle Teal has only played catcher, right field, and left field. So, yeah, third is going to be pretty much out of the question.
Yeah,
And we've got a plethora of infielders that are going to get their opportunities as well this season. So, none of them necessarily jumping off the page right now, but those guys are going to get those opportunities before Teal. I know a lot of people are thinking we need to get Teal's bat into the lineup, but his bat, he's never been a bat first kind of guy. He is showing a little bit of power this spring, but again, spring numbers don't mean a whole lot. We probably need to see a little bit more from him as the season progresses and see where, if you do need to force his bat into the lineup, they'll find ways to do that, I'm sure.
right. I totally agree.
All right. Let's get back to the rotation. And since we started talking about Davis Martin, let's go ahead and move on to him and how you feel about him. I do think that there is a chance that he is the starter for the home opener. I don't know if he might be the opening. Well, the home opener is opening day, is it not?
Yeah, they actually open at home
Yeah, they do.
for once. I feel like they've opened on the road for
Yeah,
forever.
March 27th. So yeah, always love those early March games, right? Can't we?
Yeah,
We
that's
can't
great.
get it.
I'm going to the Saturday and Sunday game, depending on weather. But yeah, those can be a little chilly, just a bit.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We've had some cold ones out there. I've been out there in the snow, 30 degrees and snowstorms, and can't see across the field.
Don't think
We
I've
had
ever
one
done.
a few years ago where it was like the fourth or fifth inning and it turned into a blizzard. Good times, good times. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about Davis Martin. Sorry, I keep getting off track here.
No, you're
I
good.
apologize. I might be a little. If I get to rambling, dude, just step on me. I started the new job this week. It's been an information overload, and I think the mouth is maybe moving faster than the brain right now. So, by all
Listen, it's a
means,
slow news week. It's still spring training. We can ramble away.
absolutely. We do have a lot going on in the chat, though, and I promise, guys, we're going to get to those things. But we did set out with a little bit of a guideline that we wanted to get through this, at least the starting rotation and where we think it's going. So, we'll come back to some of these.
Yeah, but going back to Davis Martin, 4.32 ERA last year, 47 strikeouts, 57 or 50 innings pitched. I mean, that kick change is a huge pitch for him. Coming back from Tommy John, um, I think he's going to be a guy who eventually is going to be a trade piece just because Sox theoretically have three aces coming up, um, aces. But um, we'll kind of see. He's a
I like
really
the air
good,
quotes, by the way.
yeah. I think
Aces.
he's a good fifth starter, fourth, fifth. He's a back of the rotation guy for most teams, but um, kind of with what the Sox have available for this, um, opening day, I think he's got a good shot to um, be the opening day starter. So far in the spring, though, 4 innings pitched, nothing given up, and 5 strikeouts in 4 innings. So it's been a good spring for him, which is always huge, especially because kind of have a full off season for him coming off of an injury. Good to see him, continue to start 2025 off strong.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I'm going to reference uh, the Sox Talk podcast with our Chuck and his interview during that time, uh, and they talked about that kick change quite a bit. They brought up the fact that you know, kind of funny. They're in Oakland, and he gets approached by Bannister and some of the other coaches, and they're like, "Dude, your changeup is like awful." And he kind of
Yeah,
just looked at it like, "Are we kidding?" And they're like, "No, it's awful." And he's like, "All right, well, do you have any? Do you have any? Can you coach me up a little bit?" And they introduced that kick change to him, and there's a handful of guys now. There's been reports that some of the other White Sox pitchers are now picking it up and trying to develop it a little bit. But in his case, he says it. He threw it like 3 or 4 times, and it felt weird to him. And then all of a sudden, it just started biting and biting. And they were doing this in catch, like. And in his next appearance, he went out and used it. Chucky Robinson was behind the dish, and he told him, "Let's just sprinkle it in." He said he ended up throwing it like 20 or 22 times in that first outing.
yeah,
And he said he threw like 7 of the best kick changes that he's ever thrown. And it's a huge, now he thinks it's his best pitch, and he's trying to even throw it hard. He made the joke that he hopes that he can throw it faster than his fastball this year. He's throwing it at like 90, 91, but the drop off it just drops off a cliff as it gets right before it hits the plate. It's pretty impressive stuff. So having that in his arsenal, I expect to see his numbers kind of even themselves out and come back around after, last year, again, like you said, coming off of Tommy John, and being your first time back at the MLB level. The numbers weren't awesome. You're right. His whip was almost at 1.5. And then he didn't have any, his win loss record was like 0-5 or 0-6 or whatever it was. Again, you can't really read too much into that because you're talking about a White Sox offense that wasn't scoring any runs either.
right.
So, you kind of just hope that we're not focusing on wins and losses in the pitchers, records, obviously, because we have a team that is projected to be offensively anemic, right? And we were all hoping for the best. A couple of these guys put it together, and who knows, maybe you do get something fun and exciting to watch. We're all keeping our fingers crossed. We've all been missing that for a few seasons now. We would love to see it. But, you can't expect it until it starts happening. And it's unfortunate because I don't want to be that guy who poo-poos on it. But, we're just a little jaded.
Yeah,
And we hope that we're proven wrong. But, yeah, I expect at least the whip and the ERA to kind of come down and for him to be really, really challenging as a starting pitcher.
yeah. I mean, if he can put it all together, he could be a guy who, I don't know if he'll ever have, top of the line starter potential, but um, he could be. I think on there's quite a few teams that like he could be a really solid back end starter um, for a lot of teams, and we'll see kind of what happens. But he's definitely a guy I'm interested in watching. Kind of see what happens as the year goes on.
Yeah, I agree. We have a question. Uncle Ted in the chat is asking why we think Grant Taylor got sent down. You got any thoughts on that?
I only got up to like high A last year, right?
Right. That's pretty much my thought. He's
Yeah,
he's inexperienced, and we all know he was throwing some heat, this spring. But it's also been reported that they want to take that heat back a notch, so that
yeah,
he doesn't. We don't want dead arm or injured arms, especially with guys that we're hoping to bring along and do something. And there's just so many guys in line. I mean, this is a stacked White Sox pitching staff from top to bottom in the organization. There are tons of guys who, if you're following FutureSox and you haven't checked out our top 30 that's come out, and then you go beyond the top 30 and you look at the just miss list, and then some guys even put out beyond that honorable mention type lists. We're we're talking about there's so many arms that are going to even climb into that top 30 and move into the top 10 over the next couple years. So, yeah, he is 23, I believe. But
I think
there's,
he's
I mean,
22.
yeah, he's coming up on 23. I remember looking it up. I'm not sure. As a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and pull that up now.
He is coming up on 23, 5/20/2022.
Yeah, so he'll be 23 in May.
I don't
But
think he gets up to the major league this year, though. I think he's a guy he's kind of in the Noah Schultz, Higgins. I think he'll fly through the minors this year,
I'm
and
sure.
maybe you see him at the end of the year. But like that's best case scenario.
Right, and you want to see a guy like that. You don't want to. I mean, that's like throwing him to the wolves.
Right.
Let him work his way through some of the minor league levels, because you throw him out there. He has looked good in spring training, right? But you want a guy like that to face the level of hitter that he's maybe right at or just above, to kind of gain and keep that confidence going.
Yeah.
You throw him out there against the Shohei Otanis and the Juan Soto's and all any other big name hitters you want to talk about on a daily basis, regardless of what he's done in spring, it's completely different during the regular season, and you can really crush that confidence quickly. And there's really no need to force him. So
Yeah. He didn't even make it a high A last year. He made up to Kannapolis. That's it. So
right,
you know,
yeah,
I
you're not
get it.
from the ballers to or
Right.
to the White Sox in one off season. So
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see, not to get into prospects that much, where they start him. Whether it's Birmingham, whether it's Kannapolis, whether it's
yeah, I don't. He was reassigned, and I don't remember where they did. But anywho, uh, yeah, I don't. It's just it's a little soon, is all I'm gonna
yeah,
say. And we do expect good things and big things from him. Obviously, as he was the unsung prospect who all of a sudden is made like top 5 in the organization lists almost across the board. You look at
hmm
Baseball America and BB Ref and Fangraphs and everybody else and their brother who's putting, a top 30 out for each team. And Grant Taylor really shot up that list for everybody. So, yeah, it's not like we don't expect him to do anything. It's just you got to give the guy a little bit of time.
yeah,
So,
totally
and
agree.
I don't mind. This is the one show I won't mind talking about prospects.
Yeah,
We are still Future Sox, and because of what there's, the arsenal that the Sox have, I think it's almost inevitable to not, you know, it's inevitable we're going to talk about prospects. So,
right.
all right, who do you got up next?
Um, I guess the only other guy that's a lock for the rotation, um, which would be Jonathan
OJC.
Cannon.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. How do you feel about Mr. Cannon?
Well, he's had a disastrous start this spring. which is fair. He's another guy where like you kind of expect him to be a fourth, fifth type of guy, but because it doesn't the pitch mix isn't anything to brag about in terms of what he throws. Um, he had that really good outing against Houston, and that was kind of the highlight of the season. I'd say for the Sox evenly, but like he's not going to be a high strikeout guy. I think he's going to end up being a fourth or fifth guy in the rotation. Um, he'll probably be third this year until Thorpe comes back, but um, yeah, the sets aren't encouraging to start off here, but we'll see. I think they'll definitely pitch probably in that opening series, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, we saw some. He obviously he had his struggles here and there. But I mean, he pitched to like a 4.5 ERA last season. Uh, you got a guy that we've been watching for a while and hoping for the best from him. He get his first taste of the show last year, and there were times where those flashes looked absolutely amazing. And there were other times where there were some struggles. I believe having that experience from last year and kind of carrying that over into the new season, I think he's going to take another step. And I think that's the reason that, first and foremost, that the coaching staff believes in him and is willing to pencil him in before we got any other, news from any other guys. When you're part of that first three and there's so many guys battling for a rotation spot, to be able to be penciled in there says they have all the confidence in the world in him as well too. So I
Yep.
think he is going to take a next step. I think he's going to be somebody that's going to be a guy who's going to go out and challenge hitters. Like you said, he doesn't exactly have any one particular pitch that jumps off the page, but when he's on, he's locating well. And they're doing their homework on hot zones for hitters, and he's hitting his spots. He can be filthy, and he can be a challenge for just about any major league hitter. So looking forward to seeing more from him as well this season.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, go ahead.
No. I was going to move on to something else. So go ahead and keep going with Cannon if you want.
Yeah, no, I was just going to kind of put a bow on it.
Please do.
I think there's a lot of Cannon, Thorpe, um, Davis Martin. I think those three guys are kind of in an interesting position this year where like they're going to get the unlimited opportunities. They're probably not going to get sent down. But also, I think there's pressure on them to perform because you have all these guys in the minors. So there's kind of a weird mix of like no pressure because there's nobody really available this year, but then you have to perform this year to stay on the roster next year. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that affects the three young guys. But so I'm kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think that wraps it up quite nicely. Real quick before we move on, I'm gonna hit one more of the comments here because we're getting behind, and there's gonna be a few of them that I wanted to get back to, but I just don't know if we're gonna get there because I've got to
No,
go
listen,
way back in the chat. Chat's rolling tonight, guys, so thank you for that. Really appreciate you. But I am gonna hit one here from Wolf Larson. Thanks for checking in, buddy. Fan of the shows. He's usually hanging out with just about all of our shows. So he's asking if Ramos was supposed to get some outfield reps this spring. He says he knows he realized he tweaked his elbow, but maybe he's shagging flies on the bat fields. Only thing I can say to that is we did have Elijah down in Arizona with our own Jeff Cohen, AAA Jeff. Uh, I can all I can say is I can reach out to those guys and see if they caught any of that, if he was back there on the bat fields. But I honestly haven't heard about him getting any reps in the outfield at this point during spring. Have you?
I'm not sure about outfield. I know they're being very cautious with him coming back. I think he's going to be ready for opening day, whether that's in the minors or the majors. Um, at this point, I would very much assume the minors, um, which I don't think he'll be there very long. But yeah, I mean, he's come back from an elbow that was bothering him most of last season, so we'll kind of see what happens there.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know, especially now we have another outfield signing, minor league contract just came into camp. We'll get in a little bit into Travis Janikowski later. Uh, we'll talk about that, but that might kind of change things up in the direction of where some of these guys we thought might make some appearances in the outfield. But again, we'll talk a little bit about that later. I see Mason Adams' name being brought up in the chat. Uncle Ted, we know, and as you know, we are all big fans of Mason Adams, and we'll get into him a little bit after we get through the guys we think are going to make the rotation, or at least potentially make the opening day rotation, because we do believe he will be up in the rotation at some point this season.
Yeah.
So like we got through the three that have been named, right? And then we have I would guess say a pretty good educated guess on the three or four that are going to be battling it out for those last two spots. Why don't you go ahead and give me the guy you think is going to be your four man?
I'll go Sean Burke. Um,
We're on the same page.
yeah. Listen, dude was fantastic in the minors last year. He has deserved his spot. Um, throwing a guy like Mason Adams out there, I think is a good, thought. But it's tough because you have so many guys who kind of debuted last year. They're young as well, who you know deserve time in the rotation. The Sox are going to have kind of an issue of too much pitching, which I know people say can never happen. But like you mentioned it earlier, like you go through their top 30, they have like 15 pitchers who you think there's a shot that they're
At
capable
least in the
MLB
next,
arms.
I mean, at least in the next 2 years, and there's guys that are they're gonna force their way up sometime this
Right.
year, right? So
And the issue with Bannister is he just keeps hitting on late round guys, which obviously isn't an issue, but like, you know,
it's a
Burke
good
was a
issue to
third round
have.
pick. Right, and so there's just more and more talent and there's just not enough room for these guys. So, it'd be interesting to see, I think that's why everybody was so against Hagen Smith being drafted last year. It was like, yeah, great. Probably the best player on the board, but do we really need another pitcher? But going forward, I think it's Burke. He was good last year when he played. 1.42 ERA, only a 19 inning sample size, of course.
Right.
But was also really good in the minors last year. So excited to see what he can do. I will pencil him in, and he'll either be the 4 or the 5. I don't know. Kind of depends on what Venable wants to do there, but
Yeah, and
I
I'm with you. I think he definitely makes the rotation, whether it's 4 or 5. The big thing with him is he's one of those guys that doesn't like you get these power pitchers and guys who are really super highly touted who look like world beaters, but then they have that command blow up and they have that one bad inning, and sometimes that one bad inning snowballs. Sean Burke's a guy who doesn't really lose command very often.
yeah,
You see it maybe if he's a little bit fatigued, whatever. But I mean, this guy, he's a guy who's going to be consistently in and around the zone. Might get you some swords on pitches just outside the zone. He's going to fool some batters a little bit. Obviously, like you said, small sample size, so you're kind of putting all your confidence in the basket of it, he's just going to continue to be the pitcher that he was, throughout his rise through the minor leagues. And I think that, obviously we've seen, again, a big vote of confidence. They all speak highly of him. Bannister, Getz, Venable, they all think that this is a guy, Katz, all of them. So there's a good chance that, to be honest with you, I don't see a rotation, at least early in the season, that he's not part of, whether it's 4 or 5.
yeah. And he's going to be one of those guys that has to prove himself just because they do have so many arms that are kind of teeter tottering on their way of being a starter. Like if he's a bad start in the year, I can see him sending him down. But um, it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens with him.
Right, and that's one of those instances too, where because they have so many guys that are kind of going to be waiting in the wings to get their opportunities. If a guy does struggle, it's okay. Let's get him out. Let's let's send him down. Let's work on whatever it is that he needs to work on, where he's still pitching, on a fairly regular basis, and we can bring in one of these other guys and see how they handle that spot for a little bit. You might see the Mason Adams come up earlier than some of us may think, because a guy like maybe Sean Burke, who you're putting a lot into, doesn't necessarily start the season on the best foot. So, you know, there's chances are you're not going to see Hagen Smith right off the bat, right?
Right.
This is not a guy who's going to get thrown into the mix in the first few weeks or month. You know, you're not going to see a lot of these guys that just don't have a ton. Hagen Smith isn't far away. Let's just say that when he was drafted, we were like, this guy looks like he could just come into the major leagues right now, right? And
Yeah.
like you said, it's part of the reason why he was drafted where he was, best player available. And baseball's baseball. It's like you can never have too many pitchers. You can never have too much good pitching. So yeah, I know the fan base was looking at just an absolutely atrocious, putrid offense and was hoping to get some more bats into the system where we're just lacking from top to bottom, really. And you were hoping for maybe a prospect that would come up and kind of start to tip the scale the other way. But you can't pass up on an arm like Hagen Smith. And I think we do see him fairly quickly this season. So, all right, moving on. Who else do you think is a guy that could potentially crack the opening five? I think you're muted, bud. Are you there? Did you lose connection?
There we go. Now we're good.
There it is. Hey, all right, you're
So
back.
my mic got unplugged.
Okay.
Apparently he muted me, so but we're all good. All right.
All right.
I think it'll be one of the Milwaukee guys, either Shane Smith or Bryce Wilson. Both those guys, I think, could play either in the bullpen or in the starting rotation. It'll be whatever they want to go to. Um, my hope is it's Bryce Wilson, just because I think Shane Smith can benefit more from being a a bullpen piece, where he can really click up the velocity. But we'll see. It'll be either one of those two guys, in my opinion.
Yeah. Again, I'm with you. I would like to see Bryce Wilson. I think more early on. Uh, Mostly just because Shane Smith. We saw again. We talked a little bit about how some of these guys they might want to dial back the power pitching on to kind of get some more longevity out of them. I think Shane Smith is a guy that you can't expect him to go out and throw the heat that we've seen this early in camp. There are some folks, including some of our guys here at FutureSox, that believe, when you see him hitting 102, 10, or I'm sorry, 100, almost 101 miles an hour on the gun in spring, it might be just that excitement of knowing I'm only going to get an inning,
Yeah,
maybe two, so I can go out and overthrow maybe a little bit because I'm not going to have to go out and get 5, 6 innings in a start. So that might, be something that they're looking at if they want to continue to get that velocity out of him. Maybe you make him a 1 inning relief pitcher. The closer, the setup role, those are still kind of up in the air. I know Venable doesn't want to put a tag on either one of those spots. Doesn't want to exactly fill anybody in.
it's gonna be Clevenger. I'm gonna hate it.
I know everybody keeps saying it. I'm so, and look, Clevenger has had his moments throughout his career where he's pitched really well, right? And now he's getting a little bit longer in the tooth, and he's been through. Oh, let me try this again. He's been through some things where he battled some injury last year and didn't see a whole lot of baseball. We bring him back on a minor league contract. He's obviously got, the joke is, or the rumor is, he's got friends in high places in the White Sox organization.
No
Yeah,
longer.
there's a chance. There's
Hopefully
a
that was
chance.
bought out.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. We could talk about the Ishbia thing too, because I know a lot of people are hoping that this happens sooner rather than later. But I don't know if Jerry's going to sell the team, or at least his portion, his shares. I think he's going to ride this out until
Let's hope not.
he rides himself out. So I don't know, but we can probably do a whole nother show on that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
So yeah, I'm with you. I do like Bryce. I think he gets an early opportunity, and again, he's another one of those guys that if he gets some struggles, they can move him around. He's got some options and some availability left, where we can bring up some of those guys from Charlotte, because Charlotte looks like here's a team that plays in a bandbox of a ballpark, and the ball just kind of flies out of there. Has had a little bit of offense over the last couple of seasons, but has really not had any pitching, and
Mhm.
now they're just stacked.
Yeah.
So the night games are going to be fun this year. You wanna do a couple of I don't know, a couple two tree since we're coming up. We're just past the 45-minute mark here. You want to do a couple two tree, just miss or potential maybe fifth starters? You got anybody in
Um,
mind?
I don't. I mean, obviously, we can talk through Thorpe, who will be back eventually, kind of fighting that elbow injury, staying out of Tommy John, which is good. Um, so, obviously, we'll see when he comes back. Wasn't great last year. Had a couple of bad outings, which kind of I think tanked his overall season stats. But obviously, he was fantastic in the minors. So the hope is for him to get back, get ramped back up, and be an impact as probably what would be the third or fourth guy in this rotation. Um, once we head into May and June.
Yeah, I'm good. I actually don't have anything to add to that. You pretty much took the words right out of my mouth on Drew.
Yep.
Again, like you say, just a guy that you want to be healthy, and when he does get back healthy and back out there, you want to see the best out of him.
Yeah. Other than that, honestly, you're looking at the guys that are in Charlotte. There's been talk about Iro Uriarte, stretching out and becoming a starter, but I think he's another guy who ends up in the bullpen. He was very good there last year. So obviously you lose Kai Bush to Tommy John. So
Yeah, it hurts.
um, to start the season, it's kind of well defined rotation. I think as guys start heating up in Charlotte and, you know, you get a month or two of real baseball in you, and then Drew Thorpe comes back. I think the rotation will dramatically change in May, June, July, especially as we head into August and September.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. I think there's a couple other guys that are guys that could potentially be starters. Obviously Jordan Leisure is another guy who's been a starter most of his career. I think the Sox could potentially start him in the bullpen and maybe use him as a long reliever or a spot starter here and there when you're looking to fill in a rotation spot. Maybe even a six starter in certain situations. Potential for that. Then there's Nick Nastrini, who obviously was sent back to the minors. Again, a guy who we really hoped a lot for out of last year, and he went through his struggles. And he's talked about. I've seen some interviews where he spent a lot of the offseason working on his command and getting some pitches and the shape of pitches right. You have anything you want to add on those two guys at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, unfortunately, that was kind of the hype coming out of last year, pitching staff wise, was those two guys, both acquired in the same trade for Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly. There we go, got it there.
Right.
Um, but yeah, obviously those seasons didn't go great for them. Leisure, I thought he was kind of interestingly managed. I'll just leave it at that. And then Nastrini kind of wasn't great. But he's cleaned up some stuff, so we'll see if the command and the control get there. But again, it's another guy where those are Leisure potentially is a bullpen piece, but Nastrini, who's been a starter most of his career, is like you only have what is potentially two spots here in a rotation after next season. So what do you kind of look like, you know? And the Sox have better arms, in my opinion, than Nastrini. So is he a trade piece? Is he a guy that you try to put in the bullpen? But again, the Sox have a loaded bullpen. So um, there's a lot of average that surrounds this White Sox pitching staff, but it's a lot of it, and it fills up a lot of spots. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens. Obviously, the deadline will be huge. They'll unload a lot of those, or hopefully unload a lot of those bullpen art pieces, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think some of these guys, your best value is going to be just that spot starts, long relief, showing that they can stretch themselves out more than an inning or two. To show other potential suitors that this is not just a bullpen arm. This is a potential starter for your rotation.
Right.
And hopefully, showing that some of these guys that maybe have been battling a little bit of injury here and there can come out and be that guy. And maybe the Sox get something back in return. Who knows? Maybe they come back and they blow us away. All of these guys that we're bringing up are guys that have been talked about as being potential. I don't want to say aces, but some of them could be 2, 3 pieces
Yeah.
in rotations. And if that comes to be, we might be talking about moving somebody else. You never know. A lot of these guys are on either rookie deals or early into their contracts, so there is some control, which again leads to more value. So we'll see what happens as the season progresses. But like we started out at the top of the show, there isn't a major league ball club out there that doesn't use like at least 10 pitchers throughout the season
Right.
in their starting rotation. Even if it's only 1 or 2 starts here or there, you're going to need those arms in your arsenal. So I don't know. I think for me that probably. I mean, we could go down the list. We could spend hours and hours going down the list of guys who we think could potentially be starters at some
There's a ton
point.
of them.
But I think that covers the majority of the names that are going to be your at least everyday starters at this point. If somebody gets injured or goes down, we'll revisit this later on in the
Yeah.
season. So
Totally
we've
agree.
got a couple minutes left here. I told you before the show started that I wanted to get into something, and I know you had a little something you wanted to get into. I will go ahead and start with yours with the Travis Jankowski signing.
Yeah, I mean it's about as boring as it comes, right? I mean it's defensive plus no bat fielder, which they've already tried with Michael A. Taylor, and Slater's not a great bat either. But really, I think it just means that they're expecting Benny and Slater to be miss the at least first couple weeks of the season. Um, wasn't really important news, but like there's no point of bringing in a guy now um, if you're not expecting him to make starts in at least the early parts of the season. So I would assume Benny is not starting on the 27th, and I would assume Slater's not. I'm assuming Jankowski fills in.
Do you
Um,
think so? I mean, they brought him in on a minor league contract. Then again, though,
what's the point of
it's
signing
late.
him to him? Right. You're so
It's
late in the year. I just don't know if
right,
there's a point to, bring him in now.
right, right. I'll agree with that. I mean, the guy's a excellent defender,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you have him out there with potentially Talkman in right field and him in left and Luis Robert Jr. in center, and you might have one of the better defensive outfields in baseball and one of the best ones you've seen in the White Sox
Right.
organization for a while at the MLB level. But the like you said, it's just a little bit boring because again, this is a guy who doesn't swing a huge bat.
Right.
He's going to fill a need when that need comes to light, when it comes to fruition. And it's not a bad prognostication to say that maybe Benny's not as far along in his healing. Now it's kind of early to say, but he thought he was going to be able to be back before spring training was even over, possibly, right?
Right.
Or not miss any MLB time. Uh, Even if we put him at that 6 week mark, it puts him at missing like 12-ish games.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance that maybe he does miss some time at the beginning of the season, and he might have got out over his skis making predictions that he's going to be back in time
Well, I think
for
every
opening
player
day.
kind of looks to hope to be back, but yeah, I just
Well,
don't see it.
nobody wants to sit with injuries, right?
Right.
So,
I don't know. He's getting paid quite a bit. I wouldn't mind sitting with. Could
I
Anthony
mean,
Rendon it?
yeah, you want to give me 85 million to,
Not do
you
anything.
know, yeah, to baby my wrist? I will take that.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
I would take 1/10 of that, 1/100th of that to sit at home for a little
Math's
while.
not that good.
I mean, just to sit at home for a little bit.
I mean, I'd probably take. I, I won't put a number on it, but it'd be pretty low.
Right? Give me $800 to spend a week at home. A couple,
Right.
8 grand to spend a couple weeks at home. I'm happy.
And yes, I understand that these guys don't actually spend their time at home. They're rehabbing and
Right.
all that. But
Right. They are putting in some work for sure. So yeah. Um. All right. Moving on from Mr. Jankowski. I did want to address, and the reason I want to address this next topic is because I'm seeing so much, and I know you've seen it as well on the socials. But yesterday it was announced that Colson Montgomery was reassigned to Charlotte, and there was about one half of White Sox Twitter that was like, "Hey, this is a great move," and the other half was absolutely losing their mind. Like, why are we doing this? What is going on? Bring Colson up. And I'm just gonna go ahead. I have my thoughts. I will share them after I get something from you. Let's let the people hear what is on Jacob Thome's mind.
yeah, I get it completely from Guts' standpoint, Venables' standpoint. Listen, the dude's missed what 2 weeks now. He hasn't been great in spring. He started it off with that home run, and since then, I don't think he has a hit. Um, so listen, let the dude prove himself at AAA. He was bad last year in AAA. Clearly, hopefully not permanently. The back is still bothering him. He reflared up, and so hopefully, he's ready to go. June call up or May or whatever, whenever he starts hitting. Um, I still believe in the kid. I still think he can be a Corey Seager type of, bat with the power that's in there and the swing and the defense. Maybe he moves over to third, but um, I don't think it's the White Sox. Just because he's not making the team, I don't think that makes him a bust in terms of
Yeah,
that.
we
So
don't believe in
uh,
you. No, that's not what's happening.
yeah,
Not at all. And my thought on this is, we've talked about that crowded infield, right? And not really having any major standouts in that crowded infield. But we did see a resurgence from Lenny Sosa Jr. in the second half. We saw a bit of a resurgence from Brian Ramos. You do have the Brandon Drurys who are having a good spring. You've got there's so many names to go down the list that guys that need opportunities. And Colson Montgomery hasn't even started his service clock yet. These are all guys that are either, out of options, on their last option, guys that were brought in specifically by the organization to be able to fill in these holes and kind of, even if it is piecemeal, kind of build a little bit of an infield that's not where we're forcing up a 23-year-old Colson Montgomery after going through some injury battles with the back and then re-aggravating the back this spring. There's no reason to rush him. He's 23 years old. And I told you this before the show. I saw somebody make the comparison to Juan Soto and how Juan Soto's only, 2 years older than Colson Montgomery is. And that's really not fair to Colson
right,
just because he was a top prospect, highly rated prospect. There still is a highly rated prospect to put that, that Juan Soto tag on him. They're different players, number one. And number two, I mean, Juan Soto's obviously a generational talent that they don't come around every day. And to think that, yeah, I told you, I don't think that maybe Colson has that in him, at least with the bat. Eventually, if he can get healthy and get that back in right place, maybe the bat comes back to what it was before, and we do see Soto-esque. I don't want to put that pressure on him to match Soto, but Soto-esque numbers,
right.
where you've got some pop, you've got some decent OPS and OPS plus. Yeah, I mean that would be fantastic, but again, he's 23 years old. He's been dealing with issues. Development is not linear by any means. Some guys come into their own at different ages, and he's got the skill set. So just pump the brakes. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I talked about this I think in last week's show. Like he's got the issue of he was drafted in 21 as a young high school kid, and he's been the Sox number one prospect since like the year when Noah took over. So like Sox fan have just been like, he's our only good hitting prospect. He's our only good hitting prospect. It feels like he's been our only good hitting prospect for 4 years. Um,
It
and I think
kind of
that's kind
has
of
been.
wearing on him, or wearing on the fan base of like, all right, when are we finally going to see this kid? But listen, you bring in Ryan Fuller, and I wonder if Fuller wants to get a full look at him in Charlotte and make the proper adjustments and see what they can get going down there because I saw the argument of like there's extra comp picks awarded if he comes up within the first 2 weeks and wins Rookie of the Year, or like 3 years before Arb wins MVP or something like that. And it's like, yeah, but I'd rather that doesn't happen. I think he's got no shot of that if you start him in the majors, especially because you already have a kid who had a rough year last year and he's been a pro. He's taken it the right way, but like confidence can't be that high because of the year you had last year, and then you're gonna stick him in the majors where he's clearly not ready yet. I think that's just a recipe for disaster. So um, glad to see the Sox not rushing it, especially because the Sox are gonna be horrible this year. What's the point of pressuring a guy to come up and be a top player for you? So glad to see him back in AAA. He will debut this year, and I think it'll be before the All Star break. But we'll see.
As long as he's healthy, as
Yeah,
long as that
as long
the
as he's
back
healthy.
situation works itself out, and he gets the proper rehab with that. But yeah, I agree. I do think we see him sometime this year. I'm not going to put a timeline on it, obviously, because again, it is a crowded infield. There are a handful of guys that are going to get their opportunities. I think the White Sox, again, we talked about it. As much as I have been down on Miguel Vargas, I hope he proves me wrong, but he's going to get his opportunities because he was the centerpiece of one of the biggest trades in the last few years out of the organization. And you need to at least know that one way or the other. Okay, if he does turn out to be a bust, we have to give him the opportunity. We can't just take the last 2 months of the season and say, well, this didn't work out.
Right.
You're coming from what's thought of as being one of the best organizations in baseball to being in the absolute baseball doldrums. Coming over to the White Sox and expect this kid to have the right mentality and be the player that everybody was touting him to be and boosting his ego to be. And then you come over here and you just kind of take the wind out of his sails. So he's going to get his opportunities as much as, some of us might not agree with. I do understand why they would do that. And then again, like I said, Brian Ramos came on second half last season. Lenyn Sosa came on second half last season. These guys are all going to get their chances because they're all, like I said, they're running out of options, if not out of options. So no reason to force Colson into the mix now.
Yeah. You have, as you mentioned, Vargas. You have Mydroth. You have Rojas, who you just signed to a big deal, or not to a big deal, but a deal. Um, you have a plentiful rotation of middle infielders that you don't need to rush, and
Absolutely.
especially young guys. I mean, it's not like you're having to play old guys. Mydroth is still a prospect. Sosa is still very young, so um,
All right.
yeah,
Sosa, Ramos, Mydroth. I mean, even uh, Rojas. We're not talking about the oldest dude on the planet, right? We're talking about guys that they're there for a reason and they're gonna get their chances for sure.
yeah.
Cool. You got anything else you want to get into tonight before we
I
put a
think that's
ball on
it.
this thing? No? All
That
right.
is it.
Well, in that case, I am just going to go ahead and say this has been Hot Takes and Heaters. You can find us Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Central right here on YouTube Live, as well as the Purple app. For all of our written content and Patreon exclusives, you can find that at FutureSox.net. Check out our prospect and MLB highlights as well on our YouTube channel. Our very own Ian Estridge puts a lot of work and time into that. And he's going to bring you a lot of video that you are not going to find anywhere else. Don't forget to hit that like, smash it, break your keyboard on that like button.
Punish it, as Ian would say.
Punish, as Ian says. Subscribe, hit the little bell for your notifications so you can get all the updates on everything that we've got going on here at Future Sox. And of course, if you like some of the content you see here on our live streams, go ahead and hit that super chat. We appreciate all and any donations. For my co-host, Mr. Jacob Thome, you can find him on X at jthome21. I am Danny Miller at Danny Miller FS. This has been Hot Takes and Heaters. Until next time, as always, go White Sox.